Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Creative Writers and Illustrators. And my guest for the day is Aditi Rao. She's written a whole lot of books for children of all ages. Our book for the day is Noon Chai and a Story, which is published by Tulika. Welcome, Aditi.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah. So tell us something about your book. Have you, an obvious question, have you tasted Noon Chai?
I tried to make it.
Okay.
And it was, you know what, even more than drinking it, the making it was so much fun. I really enjoyed it. I mean, seeing the color come alive in that bowl and, in that pan, it was really nice. And yeah, it's a very interesting taste. I'm not a tea drinker. I don't even drink regular tea. So I think in that sense, I had really nothing to compare it with. So I really enjoyed the whole experience of making and drinking it.
Mhm. Is this book inspired by a real incident?
The book is inspired by many real incidents. Uh, the whole theme of separation and loss that happened when the line of control was so haphazardly drawn in 1947, and what the people of Kashmir face on a fairly regular basis is what has inspired the book actually. Over something as redeeming and beautiful as a cup of noon chai,
Right.
pink.
Can you quickly tell our viewers what your book is all about?
Sure. Noon Chai and a Story is about a little girl in the Gurez Valley. And Gurez is the last valley just on this side of the line of control, on the India side of the line of control, in the district of Bandipura. And Bandipura is connected to Srinagar through the Razdan Pass, which is buried under snow for almost 5 to 6 months in the year during the winter months. And hence the people of Gurez who once enjoyed a very, very busy, active life because actually Gurez was on the Silk Route, the ancient Silk Route that passed from China all the way to Rome, to the Mediterranean Sea. This little place that was once so active, it was the gateway to Central Asia, suddenly went into oblivion when the route got closed. And now they live very, very isolated lives under the harshest of conditions. This book is about a little girl called Amya who she studies in a school which is visited by a gentleman from somewhere in the plains, maybe Delhi or someplace like that. He wants to introduce the concept of books and reading to these little children in Gurez. And so he gives them their first book and tells them that he wants them to read it and feel inspired and to collect lots of books for their library. And so these children, they're very enthusiastic. They love the book that he gives them. And once he goes back, they know that they have to collect lots of books because he promises to come back again in the summer and count the books. And they don't want to disappoint him, but also the big quandary is where do you find books in Gurez? I mean, in Gurez, you get lots of snow, you don't have any books. And so it's what this little girl does to go about building the library in her school. It's how she collects stories and how all the children follow suit. And finally, they end up making a beautiful library for their school with homemade books.
Yeah. So, for a city child, the first question which pops up is this place, Gurez, is just away from Srinagar. I mean, it's 123 kilometers, I checked. Right? So, why can't the children just go to the city and buy books? Or why did they have to make their own books? That's a question which kind of haunts, right? And it leads to a lot of other related questions. So,
When reading this book, and the main reason for writing this book also was to introduce this entire world to children who grew up in big cities and grew up in a completely different scenario with a totally different mindset simply because their circumstances are so different, so much easier than what these children go through, not necessarily just in the Gurez Valley but in so many parts of India. Like for example, during the lockdown, all our kids just got online. They had rooms to themselves. They logged into computers on devices of their own, and they were able to go through uninterrupted classes. Whereas there are so many, like thousands, lakhs of children out there in our country who don't have devices, who don't even live in houses which have, even a room for themselves to sit and to read. I've had kids coming in for workshops that I teach, sitting on the street with a shutter of a shop at the back, and they've managed to get some device from somewhere and they're trying to attend the workshop. So, these are very different realities. And I think that it's good. I mean, I'm happy for the children who have plenty, but I think it's always good for them to be aware that there are other circumstances. So, for example, the children of Gurez, how are they going to come to Srinagar? In Kashmir, 120 kilometers is a very, very long distance. There are numerous military checkposts. Militancy is a huge problem there. They are not allowed to travel very freely. There are the issues of tremendous quantities of snow, which actually go up to 20 and 30 feet. There's this issue of being buried under snow for large parts of the year where they don't leave their houses. They have to just sit, close to the Bukhari and just keep warm. And those are very different conditions. So a book is actually, what our children take for granted is an unheard of, not even a luxury, it's almost unheard of for so many children out there in the world.
Right. So this book also touches upon the marriage between first cousins. I think yours is the first children's book. I have not read anything before, which touches upon this subject. So did you have a problem convincing the publisher that this is an element which should be there, or were they like, yeah, let's just go for it?
Oh, not at all. It was not even an issue, because the fact is that so many people in India marry into their own families. Many people. I mean, I'm South Indian. It's commonplace for people here to marry their mother's younger brothers, their fathers, sisters, sons, their mother's brothers, children, like whether it's a girl or a boy. And so this is not an alien concept at all. In this story, Amya's Dedi, as she calls her, it's Dedi because it's in the Shina language. It's not Dadi as in Urdu or Hindi, Hindustani. It is Dedi. So they're the Dardik tribe. And among tribals, I mean, I think this would be so common as it would be among anybody else in, any of the mainstream cultures. So it was never even a problem. They didn't even bring it up. I think it's almost expected.
Right. Fantastic.
So when Dedi marries her first cousin as a little girl, also do remember that she's only 12 when she marries that boy. Yes. That again is very, very common.
Right. Ghazal Qadri she has done some beautiful illustrations in the book. Can you tell us more about it? Which is your favorite illustrations? I mean, they just bring so much of cheer. It's like putting the spotlight on the other side of Kashmir.
Totally. Actually, I should tell you that the other side of Kashmir is probably the militancies and the problems. But Kashmir as a place is so rich. It's the land of Sufism. It's a land of religious tolerance and a religion that has been taken not to just the practices, but to the spiritual aspects of it, like the Sufis and Bhakti movements, which didn't just stop the ritualistic practices of religion, but got into the deeper elements of love and tolerance and what it is to discover the God within yourself. So it's about elevation, and where there is that kind of a mindset, I think what is bound to follow is beauty and creativity and art. So Kashmir is about its artisans. I mean, a large part of the population makes its daily living, it earns its daily bread through art, to artistic, embroidery and beautiful stuff. So Ghazal has picked this up. I mean, their cuisine is fantastic. Their art, the Ari work that they do, Tilla work, they have so many. They work with paper mache. And I mean, it's really something. And when you're surrounded by that kind of beauty and nature, I think it would be really hard to not turn artistic yourself. So if you look at Ghazal's, this is my favorite illustration, I think.
Yeah, this mine too.
Isn't it?
Yes.
So this is
yes.
Amya has made her book, her book through Dedi's story. She's taken Dedi's story and she's transcribed it. And she's had her older sister, who's very artistic, draw the illustrations. And then she brings that book to school and she shows it to her friends. And this, all this one says is that a week later, the library of one book had become a library of two. We huddled around the Bukhari and run our fingers lightly over my Sa's beautiful drawings. Sa is sister in the Shina language. They gentle words. So as you can see, the words have nothing to do. The text has nothing to do with this. And yet Ghazal has thrown in this particular thing, that the mat, the carpet upon which the paper has been laid out, this is called Ari work. It is done with an, and looks somewhat like chain stitch. Okay, so it's beautiful. I mean, that she's thrown in this completely unexpectedly. It could have just been a plain flow or a wooden flow, but I love that she did this. Then if you just look at the cushions behind Dedi and Amya here, or even better than that, here's another one. Look at this one, the cushion behind Dedi here. It's so subtle, you can barely see it, but this is not an ordinary cushion. This again is typical Kashmiri Ari work that they do, and that fills their. Look at this. Look at this cushion here behind Dedi's. Right? So this is what Ghazal has done for the book, is that she's juxtaposed, she's added this element of gentleness and childlike beauty. It's a very difficult theme, which really, as a writer, because I was writing about a pretty difficult subject. This was a subject of loss, and this woman has lost her husband because he went to trade on the other side to Gilgit-Baltistan and never got home to her, his young wife. This is a story from her past. He never got to come home to his young wife who was waiting for him, because an imaginary line was drawn in the middle. And as she says, Amir was on that side, a person of a different country, an enemy country. I was on this side, and in between were the men with the guns. Talks about this line that was drawn that nobody could see, but everybody spoke of. And what are these lines after all? They are only part of the human imagination, the egoic imagination of humankind, because I don't think one mountain knows that it's been separated from its fellow mountain by a line. I don't think it cares. You know, so, this kind of a thing is it's a pretty heavy theme. I had tried to lighten up by the beauty of the noon chai and the color of it and the gentleness, but Ghazal has added a whole different dimension of beauty.
Yeah. So, when you're speaking of loss, I find that theme recurring in your books. I noticed that it was a part of Chuchu Mantu's Jar of Toffees. So why does this element appear in your books? I mean, is that it's just a subconscious thing, or is it like a conscious way of dealing with something?
I think Chuchu Mantu's Jar of Toffees, which is this book, it came out with Pratham Books last year, also during the lockdown.
Yes. Yeah.
It was on the Storyweaver platform, but it came out in physical form last year, in I think sometime March or so.
Yeah.
So Chuchu Mantu's Jar of Toffees for me was actually an actual way of dealing with the loss of a very beloved uncle. It's actually called Chuchu Mantu. His name is Suresh. Yeah. And when I couldn't say Suresh, so it used to come out as Chuchu. And in Konkani, Mantu means your father's elder brother. And Krishna has illustrated this book so exquisitely.
Beautiful illustration.
This is actually, this was my way of dealing with loss. But I think that in this, in our world today, we live in a very harsh environment. There's so much of separation. There's so much of slotting of people and things into concepts and religions and spaces and regions and whatever. That I think the sense of loss is all pervasive, constantly. There's also, like, you have the pandemic, so there's disease now, and there's also not just actual loss, but the impending losses that we know are somewhere out there. And so maybe that's what is subconsciously addressing I have another book here called Growing Up in Pandupur. This came out many years ago. I wrote this way back in, I think it was in 2010. It later came out here, this is the second edition of it. Right. 2007, the original one. And there I've written about grandfathers and trees, which is about the lost grandparent, a magician grandfather. So I think you just brought this to my notice, Shamla. I never thought about this. I kind of, it's interesting that you noticed that I do tend to write about loss often.
I'd also like to share with the viewers that this is Tulika's second. I don't know. Can you just open this page with the word bird? It's you know.
Which there are many word bird pages. Which one?
And pick anyone. Pick anyone.
Okay. Hang on. Here you go.
Yeah. So this is Tulika's second word bird book. Which actually has birds on the pages when new concepts of a culture are introduced, right? And that I think the first book they did was Ekidoki, and this is the second one. So the birds are beautiful. Ghazal has, like as usual, put her charm onto them.
Yeah. They're so animated, no? The birds, they're so alive.
Absolutely lovely. They just fit into the storyline so beautifully.
Totally. It was interesting. I was doing a session on this the last time, and I showed the kids a page, and there were no words. I just used the illustrations. And when I showed them, I said, "What do you think is going to happen next?" And one of the kids said, "I think one of the birds is going to come and take away the ingredients for the noon chai." And I think so interesting because he actually thought that the bird was part of the story, and of course, it didn't even strike me that they would see it that way. But since there were no, it looked like the bird was going to steal a page from the book and run away, the moon chai ingredients or something like that.
Yeah.
So she's done a really fine job of incorporating the birds in the. It really helped to have the little word birds in there to come in and explain concepts like Dastarkhan, which is Dastarkhan, the tablecloth that's laid out in a traditional home, particularly a Muslim home. They always serve food on the Dastarkhan, and samawar in which they make things. It has coals on the bottom, red hot coals, and they cook in samawar or boil. And so many words, the Bukhari, so many words like that were able to be explained so seamlessly through the word notes there. So
yeah, one of your books recently was added to the Parag Honor list. Can you tell us something about it? The Candid Tales. That is so different from what you've written earlier.
Well, Candid Tales it's called Candid Tales, India on a Motorcycle. It's inspired from the actual biking journeys of a young lady called Candida Lewis. You can actually look up. Candida approached me several years ago and asked if I would write her stories. She had traveled across India all by herself. It was a solo journey. She traveled starting out from Hubli, which is her hometown. She traveled all over the place, right down into Gurez Valley, including into the Gurez Valley. She went to Ladakh, she went to Rajasthan, she went to this side, to the Seven Sister States, came all the way down, touched Kanyakumari, and very typically of her, landed up in Pondicherry in 2015 December, right when the cyclone hit.
Oh.
And in Pondicherry, that story is also included. It's the last story in the book.
Okay.
But I just loved the fact that she had traveled so much. So I immediately told her, look, I'm going to do my best to approach publishers. She wanted me to make it into an adult novel, but I realized that for some reason, people were not very interested. Publishers were not. Finally, I approached Tina Naram. She had just joined Collins at that point. She'd taken over as publisher. So I met her and I kind of floated the idea to her. And it was a huge leap for her because they had never done something like this. But then Tina was just awesome. She took my word for it that it would be a good book. She managed to convince the sales team. And then we wrote the entire book in a very short period of time before Candida took off for her next trip, which was a road. She actually rode from India to Australia.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So I loved her stories. A lot of the stories in Candid Tales are also fictionalized, partly semi-fictionalized or fully fictionalized, in order to protect the identities of the people that she met, and also because Candida is an adventurer. She doesn't note her adventures; she just lives them. So many places I've used my own experiences, my own journeys to add in there. But that's what the book is about. It's just about travel. It's Ruchi Shah has done the
yes, amazing. I mean, Yeah,
It's
I was
beautiful.
leading to that was leading to my next question. You collaborated with some of the most amazing artists in India.
Oh,
Pal
I'm so
Shenoy and
happy.
here Ghazal Kadri, Ruchi Shah,
Right.
and each one bring they bring out such different facets of a story so beautifully.
Absolutely. When I think about it, nobody could have done Chuchumantu's jar of toffees like Krishna did, Krishna
Absolutely.
Balashan,
Yes, yes,
because he's just so soulful. I mean, he just gets it. He
yes.
gets anything you're trying to say, even if it's the most subtle thing you're saying. He just gets the emotion. He stays with the text, he reads it, he feels it. Sometimes he even has his own emotions when
Mhm.
he reads it. And then something just is born from there organically. And so I just think, I mean, I don't think there was anybody else who could have done Chuchu Manthu's jar of toffees like the way he did. If I just look at this, when the
Yeah,
child
yeah,
is searching for her uncle,
yeah.
and she can't figure out where he's gone because he's the kindest person in her world. So she's searching for his kindness in the drawers and under his yoga mat where she used to do yoga with him.
Mm.
And he was so kind when she used to trouble him when he was doing yoga. And
Mm.
finally, she looked at his cupboard and out falls a shirt which he used to wear. It falls on her head and she holds it. And she discovers his jar of toffees, from which he used to drop sweets for the little children, the poor children in the street below.
Mm.
So, and then she starts to cry until she discovers that kindness is not something that dies with people. It stays inside you and you can carry it forward.
Yes,
So
yes,
typical, right?
absolutely.
And then Ghazal, who again being Kashmiri herself,
Mm.
I think has Kashmir in her subconscious mind. And so when
Yes.
she created from there, and
Mm.
that really worked to bring in the feel of Kashmir. These are the logwood cabins that are typically, and it's not, there
Uh,
are no nails hammered in to hold the wood together. There is
okay.
an system by which
Okay.
the log sit and holds out, and it
Mm.
works best under those snowy climatic conditions. And
Mm.
then Ruchi, who's my collage expert, I mean,
Mm.
she can put anything together. Look at this that she's put together. His
Yeah.
candid experience with the children in the Gores Valley.
Wow. Okay.
She's just brought it in and she's thrown in all kinds of stuff. There are multiple photographs actually happening here, little
Mm.
sketches,
Mm.
which and she's used little, things like tickets and stuff, which ticket stubs, which she has had in her own, during her own travels. She's put
Mm.
those in and it's so fine. Look at this. This is Chandratal, where
Ah,
this,
wow. Mm.
the blue lake in the Spiti.
Right.
So,
Ah,
so
beautiful.
this
Yeah.
is Ruchi. Again, nobody could have done what Ruchi did.
So
So
the
I just
connection to Gurez Valley started sometime during the Candid Tales. Was that when the story formed for Noon Chai and a story?
yes, the story formed actually over a longish period of time. Many years ago, about 20 years ago, I traveled to those areas. I didn't actually make Gurez, but I spent a lot of time in Ladakh and then traveling towards Kargil and spaces which were so sort the undercurrents were always so tense,
Mm.
And I got to go fairly close to the China border, so along the Pangong Lake, because I was traveling with my cousin who was in the army, and a lot of the stories started to take shape there. And then when I was doing research about the Gurez Valley, because Candida she had a lot of stories. They were simple, really fun stories to tell. But I wanted to actually bring out this whole thing of what happened to the people there when the line of control was formed in 1947. So that is where the story started. I also had the great good luck of teaching a few students who came down from Kashmir. They are artisans themselves, and they came down here to learn a little more about how to tell stories around their products because handicrafts need to be built. You need stories to sell your handicrafts, right? Because they're so much more expensive. People need to know what they are getting, that they're not just buying a piece of work, they're buying a whole culture behind it and so many patient hours and hours of love and labor and skill that goes in. And so when they came down and when I got to spend a lot of time with them, teaching them how to tell stories, I learned their stories too. So I think over the years, Kashmir as a place has really built into my consciousness as as a space that is beyond just the mountains. There's so much
Right.
more happening.
Mm.
What
So
people.
I also noticed that this book has been written in present tense, which is a very unusual choice for a writer. So what did you manage to captivate in the present tense? What was not showing through in the other tenses?
I think there's an immediacy in the present tense because when you speak, well, there are two things that happen. It happens in Chuchumantu's Jar of Toffees also and in Noon Chai because we are going in both the stories. We are going into the past also. The girl has lost her uncle in Chuchumantu's Jar of Toffees, and she's going back into her memories as a little girl when she grew up with this beloved uncle who was so kind to her. And in Chayana story, you have Dedi and Amya right now in the present. And going back into the past is Dedi's story as a young girl. So, as a narrative, it helps to have the clear cut, defining time spaces in which the story is operating or switching between. But I also find that writing in the first person narrative gives my reader the sense of the immediacy. You can't dismiss it as something that happened long, long ago.
Right.
Especially with Noon Chai and a story, I think in some ways, since the past couple of years, a year and a half now, since the revoking of Article 370, I think Kashmir has become even more isolated. And so what must have happened to them during partition and during the line of forming of the line of control over the years has happened over and over and over again, various incidents. And so I did want to bring the immediacy of this is now. This is how it is now. It's the present tense.
Interesting. So, tell us something about Bhootbusters of Himmatnagar. That's a book which got released, I think, right before the lockdown.
No, it's just come out. It just came out in December. Yeah, it's just this is my 3-month-old baby.
Okay, okay. Scholastic has published it, right? Is it for
Scholastic is
middle grade?
No. It's a middle grade book. It's a continuous story. It's so different from my other what we're discussing, which has an element of reality. I hope the Bhootbusters of Himmatnagar does not have any element in reality because it's all about booths and haunting and stuff like that. But it's just about these 5 children who live in a small village town somewhere in between kind of
space. Can you hold the book? I just want the cover to linger a bit long. Yeah.
Certainly. Yeah. This again, look how brilliant Sayan Mukherjee has made this. He's kind of he's built in the tension of the story right there into the cover. It's a continuous cover actually. So if you see this is a graveyard. And front entrance of the graveyard, the children are entering the graveyard. Here. Okay. Oh, here's my favorite illustration. Let me look for it. There is this one where he talks about there's a tantric who's sitting over there, and who sort of becomes a very big part of the story in a very unexpected way. I've tried to break a lot of stereotypes that people have, tantric, black magic, and stuff like that. There was looking for it. Look what he's done. This is the guardian deity of this is the burial ground, the graveyard.
Okay.
And this is not a Christian or a Muslim Kabristan or a graveyard. This is a Hindu graveyard where community of Hindus that bury their dead. And there's also a place where there's the burning pyres going on and stuff like that. And it completely, the Bhootbusters of Himmatnagar completely busts this whole concept of ghosts and how terrible ghosts are, and that whole thing. Introduce them into our real world as part of the whole. So it's 5 kids who are setting out to crack a murder mystery, the whodunit kind of a thing.
So did it take a lot of courage to write this book? Because I know you don't have a comfortable relationship with ghosts.
Unfortunately, I've been having these brushes with ghosts for a very long time since I was a kid. When I was a kid, I was convinced I could see them. So no, not difficult at all. I think it came very naturally. Very naturally.
Were there moments where, when you've written something and you're like, oh my God, this is totally spooking me right now, kind?
No, not really. But I can tell you this for sure that some years ago it would have totally spooked me out. I come from the coast of Karnataka, from South Canada. Those are my roots actually, and we have this whole concept of this Bhutta the Gudi. Okay, Bhutta the Gudi is the little temples that are dedicated to those local bhoots in that area. And one of the last ones is a place called Panjorli, where the ghost, the bhoot in that place is constantly demanding blood sacrifices and things like that. It's very dramatic. So these things, I think I've heard stories growing up so much. They used to scare me witless when I was a kid. But over a period of time, I've learned to make my peace with them. And now it's not just peace. I think I've made friends with ghosts. I mean, hey, they're earning butter now. So
Okay.
very grateful to the ghosts, I should say.
Great. So we're running short of time. Can you quickly tell us something about the Pandharpur book? It's a book of stories?
Sorry?
Book of short stories?
It is. This is a book called Growing Up in Pandupur, once again illustrated by the incomparable Krishna Bala Shenoy. This was the first time we worked with Krishna. I've covered it because I've done so many school sessions with this book, and I was really scared that my fingers would ruin it. Actually, we have 13 stories in this. Some are by my sister Chatura Rao, and others by me. And we haven't co-written any stories. There are some by her, some by me, and they all tie into this theme of growing up. So one little fictional town called Pandupura, which is inspired from a small town on the Bangalore-Mysore route called Pandavpura.
Okay.
Pandupur, and it's on a river, and it's a small tribal community, but when the government decides to build a dam on the river, the place grows. It just completely grows. You have children coming from big cities because the engineers' children, the architects' children, they all come in, and then they start attending school in this area. So there are lots of cross-cultural stuff happening, and using as the background, we have addressed various themes on growing up, issues that children face, sibling rivalry, good touch, bad touch, themes of loss that grandfathers and trees is in this book, about the loss of a grandparent, how it is when human beings interact with wild animals that come in from the forest. So there's stories like that. I think, this is one of my favorites. We really enjoy writing this book very much. It's a book now. This is the second that's come out with Scholastic. The original was with Young.
So what influence does Chatura Rao have on your writing? Who started writing early? I mean, who was the first one to get published?
She was the first to get published.
Okay.
I can't say that she's influenced my writing in any way. Okay. But we are travelers on the same route, I think.
Right.
Which also really helps a lot because we can ideate sometimes together, and we face so many challenges. We've kind of grown in that sense. We've grown together in our careers, so we've always had each other for company. In that sense, we're very close. So we've had each other for company, and we've kind of been able to share the challenges on many occasions. But our writing styles are very distinct.
Different, right?
You will find if you read the stories, you'd be able to tell a marked difference between her stories and mine, even though they do tie into the common themes of growing up.
Right. So you still have a background in films, So do you find the entire process of writing children books, is it limiting as a medium, or do you think it's liberating?
It's just lovely. It has the only thing I would say that affects my writing from having worked in film. I started as a film person first before I moved into the writing of children's books. Was the fact that it's so visual. I was assistant director on this film called Satya. In 1997, we started working on it, and I also spent a large part on the script because I was the script assistant working with Anurag Kashyap. So I got to see the way stories were formed. But also, I got to work for a large portion of the time with the editor, Apurva Srani, in the editing room. And that is where my visual sense and the cutting points and how to jump from one chapter to the next or one scene from the next, because a chapter after like a scene. So How do you take it forward? Where do you leave it poised so that your reader or your viewer can't wait to get to the next scene?
Yes.
You know, bring in this amazing visual element into the story. Even though in books you're writing in words, I think it's amazing that the visuals are not presented to your reader, and that is your job to build in. So in sense, I never take, I never compare my mediums when I'm writing for adults. If I'm writing a short story, a full length novel, a film script, a children's book, a chapter book, a young adult's book. For me, each and every project, sometimes I write biography, sometimes which is non-fiction, and sometimes it's pure fiction. Whatever I take up is a unique project by itself.
Yes.
It doesn't have antecedents. In that sense, it's brand new. It's born from a fresh space.
So is something coming up right now, your next project?
I'm working on a play. Sorry, no, not at all.
Okay.
I'm working on a play for Katkatha Puppet Arts Trust. During the Arabian Nights, we were supposed to open in internationally, but because of the pandemic now we're all sitting quiet. But we're working extensively on the rehearsals part, the scripts almost finalized. That was fantastic. We actually traveled, we sat together in Delhi, we did a workshop, and we worked with a very eminent puppeteer from France. And from there we took off into writing our own play, and it's coming out really nicely. So very excited.
Yeah, interesting. Interesting genres and interesting formats. I mean, you always like pushing the limits, into discovering something.
It just shows up. These things just show up, and then you just take them up.
Yeah, lovely.
Go for it.
So yeah, we've come to the end of the session. So any final reasons you want to give the reader as to why they should pick up Noon Chai and the Story?
Yes. Not just Noon Chai and a Story, I would also say Candid Tales, because they sort of come together for me. Is because I just think that we're living in a lot of isolation now, not just because of the pandemic, but even thought isolation. We've become very stereotyped, these whole concepts of your identities, your religious identities, your national identities, and blah, blah. But in the past, an identity was something to take and grow with, and to grow beyond into something even more bigger and beautiful within your own consciousness. But now they become limiting. You have to hate others in order to prove your love for your whatever it is that you identify with. And my attempts in these two books, and indeed all the books that I write, is for my reader to learn that there is something beyond this. And if you miss out on love, if you miss out on the creative space of anything, a place or a person or whatever, and just take them and stereotype them based on their religion or their region or their nationality or whatever, you're just losing out on life itself. So these books have been an attempt to take my reader into different cultures, so that they see that there are just layers and layers and layers of people out there, and not just types. You're Christian, you're Muslim, you're Hindu, you're Brahmin, no, it's just to break out of all those things. And so, yes, so please, I mean, don't just read the book, but also allow the essence of it to flow into you. I hope they will transform my readers to that extent, to be more loving and more peaceful, more accepting.
Right. Beautiful ending thoughts. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bye, Shamla.
Bye.